So welcome back, friends. I've been hearing from a lot of you asking me if I would share some more stories. Some of you seem to like those. And I wanted to share the story with you that how I started my very first business, because it's just a way of not to do it. It's kind of funny, and when I look back on it now, I just think, good grief, what was I thinking? So I had got out of high school, and I was actually working for an excavating contractor, running excavator and track hoe, we used to call them. They had kind of a slow down and some tough times, and I ended up getting laid off with half the crew or so. And I remember I think I was still living with my parents, and I was talking to my dad about it. And he said, "Well, what you need to do is you just need to go start your own excavating business," and that was just that. You know, that's the type of family I came from. That was not a big deal. That was just what you did. Okay, so and I still to this day don't know how it happened. I didn't have any money. I didn't have nothing. I think the only thing I had was probably I had like an '89 Toyota pickup 4-wheel drive that I was probably still making payments on. So I went to a used equipment company. I'll never forget it. And I went in there and I said, "Yeah, I'd like to buy an excavator." You know, that's pretty ambitious. I was probably still in my teens. Okay, and so we sat down and talked about it. And the guy that was the salesman, I mean, he was really a nice guy. He was the owner of the company, and for somehow, some way, he sold me an excavator that cost, I don't remember the cost, but it was the better part of $100,000. And here I am, probably what, 19, maybe 20, got nothing. And so here was the deal. He said, "I'll tell you what." He goes, "I'll sell you the excavator, and you don't have any money for down payment." No money for down payment. "I'll tell you what I'll do. You can take the excavator, you can go start working with it, get some money coming in, and I'll let you make the down payment over a period of 4 months in 4 installments." Now keep in mind, this was on top of the equipment payment, which was significant. So I think what it was that I had to come up with was it was about $6,000 a month. That may not sound like a whole lot right now, but you have to remember this would probably been in what, the early 90s. That was a lot more money then. And so sure enough, so here I had it. I had my Toyota pickup. I didn't even have a way to haul the thing. I had no way to haul diesel. I borrowed a couple cans, or I think I borrowed like 6 5-gallon jerry cans from my granddad, scrounged some stuff up and put those in the back of the Toyota. And of course, you know, doing excavating, you need to have a big pipe truck with a pipe rack on it, because you're carrying 20-foot pieces of pipe and all that, diesel fuel and all that. So I had this pickup and this excavator with this huge payment, and the clock is ticking, right? So I went out and I started cold calling. I got in my truck and I started making phone calls, and I started just driving by subdivisions, looking for anything, you know, because I got to get some money coming in, because I got to pay for this thing. I couldn't find anything, you know. Everyone I talked to, they kind of already had some excavators, the guys that they'd worked with, and they didn't really. I probably didn't look very impressive. I had the ability, I had the skill, because I had been doing it for a long time, but I was just having a hard time with it. I found myself up in some really steep country up in the West Hills in Portland, and I don't know how I got up there, but there were some jobs up there that other guys, everyone else had turned down because they were too dangerous. They were too steep. They were lots that had never been built up. This is some of the most expensive real estate in Portland, but they had just kind of sat there because no one would tackle these things, because they were just too steep. They were on the sides of cliffs and all that. And before that, guys didn't really have excavators. They were just kind of coming on the scene, and you know, your small owner operators were starting to get them, and that kind of opened up some possibilities. So I started talking to some folks, and I got a couple of those jobs. I'll remember the first one. I was white knuckling on there. It was so steep, and I was working on a cliff, and just one mistake, and I'd have been down over the edge. I remember on the second one that I did, I was down in this hole and digging, and this guy is up there watching. You know, he's looking down, he's kind of shaking his head, and I shut the machine off, and he picks his way down there, and I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what he wanted. And he said, "Son, you make one wrong move down here, they're going to scrape you out of that excavator with a spatula." I said, he said, "Yeah, I know, but I don't have any choice. You know, I gotta make some money. You know, I gotta pay for this machine." He's like, "I'll hand it to you. You got some courage." He happened to be an excavator that had been contacted about doing that job, and he turned it down. You know, this guy had been doing it for 40 years, and there I was down there at 19 or so with my, you know, just grinding. I was grinding, man. I was so worried about those payments. I remember to this date, every time, those 4 times that I went in there and wrote that, whatever it was, that $5,000 or $6,000 check. I'm probably embellishing, you know how things go on, you know, they seem bigger in your mind, but it was a lot, trust me, whatever it was. I remember all 4 of those times going in there. It was all that I had nothing extra. It was hand to mouth every month, getting on top of that. But I finally did it. Finally got on top of it, and then got a little bit of relief, even though the payment was still big. But that kind of started, that's how I kind of got started. Well, then, then it was just eating me up, trying to move the machine around. I was getting a few builders I was working for, and they were smaller jobs, and so I had to jump from job to job to job. In excavator, you have to have a pretty big rig. It was, the one that I bought was a Hitachi EX120, so that's about just under a 30,000 pound machine. It's a decent sized machine. So I was having to hire these guys to move things around, and it wasn't super reliable. It was costing me a lot of money. And so I think my dad ran into this guy. It's like, yeah, this guy I know, he's got this old tractor trailer, and you know, he might be able to work out a deal with him. And so I went and I'd never driven a tractor trailer before. This is like a conventional, like a semi. And he had so he had this 1968 Diamond Rio with a 300 Cummins in it, and a 4x4 transfer case. If that doesn't, you truckers will know what that is. It's 2 gear shifts, and we'll get to that here in a minute. So I went and talked to him, and he's like, yeah, we kind of came up with the deal, and I had no CDL. I'd never driven anything like that before, not at all. And I said, well, how do you drive it? And remember, I'm 19. He's like, oh, I'll show you how to drive it. You know, so we were in his field, and he kind of, you know, got me going on it and showed me the gear shifter and all that, and off I went, man. No. I'm not advising this, but sometimes you do what you have to do, right? It's kind of, you know, it just is the way it is. I had to move equipment, and there was a need, and that's what I did. I didn't have a CDL. I didn't have the proper insurance. The tires on the whole front thing they were bald. The kingpins on the front of it were so worn out. There was no power steering on it. And those old trucks, they didn't have front brakes either. I'll tell you, I was a menace. I was a menace on the road. The kingpins were so worn out that you had to drive a huge steering wheel. You had to kind of drive it like this. And then, of course, the windshield wipers were vacuum. And vacuum windshield wipers, you know, they don't work very good. And here we are in the Pacific Northwest in wintertime. So you're going along and you're trying to drive this thing, and you've got 40,000 pounds on the back, and the worn out kingpins, and the bald tires with the cord showing, and not the right insurance, and no CDL, and windshield wipers that kind of get stuck, and you have to reach out and get them going every once in a while. You can imagine how dangerous this was. But anyway, so we get in the truck, and he shows me a couple things. And so here's what you had to do. You had to, if I remember right, you had 2 gear shifters, right? And the clutch, it didn't work. It was just on the floor. I don't remember how I even did that. So you'd put the first gear shift in first gear, and because it only had a 300 Cummins, and I don't think it had a turbo on it, it was way underpowered in that old Diamond Rio. So you'd put it in first gear, and you'd grab the second deal, and you'd put it in first gear. You'd start going, you know, get going. So, okay, I'm going now, and then you'd have to reach and grab I'm going to call gear shifter 1 and gear shifter 2. You grab 1, put it in neutral, grab 2, second, and grab it, put it into 2, and then put the other one into first. I can't remember, but it was complicated. And you had to do, and then you'd get going again, and you'd have to grab 1, put it in neutral, grab the second one, go into third, put the other one back into second, and the synchros weren't working, and the kingpins are worn out, and it was terrifying. And so I'm going down the road. Fortunately, the first time I rode it, I didn't have any weight on it, but I did have that 40-foot trailer on there, which was that Fontaine drop deck trailer. And finally, you know, a couple hours later, I finally got it going. You know, okay, I can do this. So I decided to go pick up the excavator and move it on to the next job. And I remember my poor sister. I would, you know, there's weight scales. We've seen the weight scales on the road. I hope the statute of limitations is out for this. I used to send my sister in my truck ahead of me to check and see if the scales were open. And this was, I think, cell phones. I had my first cell phone. I did have a cell phone on there. I don't remember how we communicated. Maybe she came back. But she'd run up there and see if the scale was open. She's like, oh, nope, scale's not open. Oh, man, we'd go buy it, right? No problem. Because if you pull in there, you know, with they would have thrown me in prison. And if the scales were open, she would tell me that we'd have to find another way around, so we played that game for a while. I ultimately ended up getting my CDL and getting the right insurance and all that, but this was what I had to do at the time. So going back, I've driven this thing for a couple days, or for a couple hours, or maybe the first day, and I decide, okay, I got it. We'll go put the excavator on there, right? So I get the excavator, and it's a whole different deal now with all the weight. I've got a couple extra buckets, some bunch of stuff. So pretty close, probably close to 40,000 pounds on this thing, and you don't realize how steep roads are until you're in an underpowered semi with a big trailer on the back and no ability, and a 4.4 transmission and a 300 Cummins, right? And so I'm on 205, and this is the busiest freeway, in Portland, and I'm coming up to this first grade. I'm losing power, I'm like, okay, I got to downshift. I got to do something here. And of course I missed the gear shift, I lost power, and I basically come to a stop on this hill in the middle on the freeway on the right hand side. So I got to start over. First gear, and I'm just creeping up this thing, and this is rush hour. It's like 5 o'clock and the cars are honking. I mean, it was an awful experience until I finally figured it out. But I can tell you 1,000 stories of close calls where I almost died in that truck. It was such a menace, and it was so scary to drive. But the moral of the story is that, as I keep saying, is I do thank my dad for putting that in me of doing what you have to do. One thing that I really admire, I'm not going to say any names or anything, but I know some guys that have been very successful in different fields that were doing things that they had very specific training from, making a lot of money. And these things they lost those jobs. They were no longer able to do it because that whole market kind of evaporated. And the guy, when you find yourself in that situation, it's really tough, especially if you have family and dependents depending on you, as these guys did. And it would be easy to kind of just to curl up and to give up on that and to quit and say, well, I can't find a job in my specific area, and so there's just no hope. Just like what we were talking about yesterday with the ram pump, about figuring out a way, and the lessons that I give to Jack about just figure it out so it's not perfect. So what? One of my favorite sayings is, you go to war with the army that you have. There's no sense on moaning and complaining that I don't have enough artillery, or I don't have enough aircraft, or I don't know that. This is what you have. You need to make it work. You lose a leg, that's what you have. You need to make it work. You're not the smartest guy or the most capable guy. It doesn't matter. You need to use what you have. You need to make it work. And that's what I had to do. I didn't have a CDL, nor did I have the time or the money to get it. I didn't have money to buy brand new tires or fix the kingpins on that truck, but I had to get a job done, and I did what I had to do it. So, there's just a lot of guys will say, well, that was irresponsible of you, and of course it was. But when you find yourself in a situation like that, sometimes you just need to do what needs to be done. But getting back to my friends, the thing that I admired the most, I think that his family, especially his wife, admired the most about him, was he was willing to swallow his pride and to go do things that maybe some guys would have seen him, if they had seen him that previously worked with him, that would think that was beneath him. He went and got a job, working by the hour, basically labor, construction type of work, until he could, get things going and get it started again. And he was really worried that his wife was going to think less of him, or his kids were going to think less of him for not being able to bring in the same amount of money that he was once able to, and how it radically changed their lifestyle, and they had to sell cars and houses and all that. But just the opposite happened. He received tenfold more respect from his family and his mom for being willing to do whatever it took to get out there and to provide for his family, because that's what makes our wives and girlfriends love us, is to be men that will provide for them, no matter what the circumstances. There isn't any excuse unless you are flat down on your back, quadriplegic. Even then, with the internet and with different things, there are options, and there's just no reason not to stop fighting. So I admired him, and his marriage improved. He has the respect of his friends. He certainly has my respect for him being able to do that, rather than just giving up and making excuses. He got in and got his hands dirty, put his work boots on, and did what needed to be done to get the job done. So I admire that. And I didn't mean this to be a story to be bragging about me. That's not it at all. And I wouldn't recommend you do what I did. Make sure you have a better plan before you decide to start an excavating business or whatever it is you do, so you don't fall into these traps and you're constantly improvising, because improvising is not a good way, or reacting to crisis is not a good way to start a business. But it's what I did, and it makes for a really great story, doesn't it? So thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Don't forget to click the thumbs up if you enjoy these, and we'll see you guys on the next video.